Hi, G. Michael Vasey again, with another edition of my Haunted Life 2 podcast. Today I'm going to read a couple of stories submitted by you, the reader of my Haunted Life 2. The Scratching Box. Back in 1963, I took a trip to Weatherford, Texas, out in the country to spend some time at my Aunt Jay and Uncle Guy's house. The Rock House, we called it, because it was made entirely out of multicoloured stone. Uncle Guy built it himself as a wedding gift to his bride, Jay. Soon after, a son, Joe, was born, then a girl, Anne. When the kids grew up, the son, Joe, married a girl with the same name as his sister, Anne, when she was only 17 years old. I was 14 and attended the wedding. On this particular trip, I was 18 years old and Joe's Anne 21. She was staying at the Rock House visiting her in-laws while Joe was out of town. We both put up for the night in the back bedroom off the kitchen. That room had been added later to the original two-bedroomed house as Joe got older and needed his own room. It was made of wood and had a different feel to it than the rest of the stone and concrete house. There was a small wood closet in the corner near the kitchen, full of blankets and winter storage. 3 beautiful round wood boxes of ascended sizes were stacked beside the closet opening. Anne and I had a great time together, confiding in each other and laughing the night away. And just as we felt it was time to turn in for the night, a loud scratching resounded in the room. We both looked at each other. What is that? The scratching went on relentlessly, and we were afraid to get out of the bed, lest it be a mouse. We could not sleep with the thought of a mouse, or another frightful intruder in our room, and finally I got up enough nerve to investigate further. It seemed the scratching was coming from the closet, but as I stood and listened, I realized it came from the bottom box of the stacked 3. Anne got out of her bed to join the inquest, and we stared, puzzled, at the scratching box. We weren't about to look in that box, but now it had our full attention. The scratching suddenly became louder and seemed to echo in the room. Whatever was in that box was big, and it wanted out. The thought of it scratching its way out under our feet sent us scurrying down the hall to Aunt Jay's bedroom door, awakening her in the wee hours of the morning. We followed her back to Joe's bedroom, where she too contemplated the scratching box. She picked it up and brought it out into the kitchen, placing the box squarely in the middle of the floor. She grabbed a broom, and Anne and I backed up, anticipating a furry onslaught. Aunt Jay reached forward slowly and flipped the lid right off the box. We all gasped. Nothing happened. We bent forward and looked in the box. It was empty. Empty except the loud scratching that went right on, echoing off the kitchen walls. We all stared at the box, dumbfounded. Nothing in it. Yet the eerie scratching continued as though a rat-sized animal was trying to get out. This was long drawn-out scratching. On and on, scratch, scratch. We walked around, talking, confused and incredulous. We got something to drink and sat there at the kitchen table looking at that scratching box. We wondered if a small termite was trapped in the woods somewhere, and the enclosure had amplified its scratching. But Aunt Jay went over every inch of that box, and the wood was hard and smooth, no room for any secret compartments. It just didn't make sense. Finally, Aunt Jay said she had to get some sleep and told us to go on back to bed. The box was left on the kitchen floor, lid off, and scratching away as we went back to bed and closed the door soundly. Anne and I listened to the scratching sounds filtered through the door until we fell asleep. The next morning we all came into the kitchen where the box still lay as we'd left it, but now it was silent. The scratching was gone. Aunt Jay put the lid on and placed the box back in the stack beside the closet door, and we looked at each other like, I won't tell anyone if you don't tell. But it is something I never forgot to this day. The night of the scratching box. What was that anyway? I never heard about anything like that to this day. Submitted by Mikey R. Apparition on the road. I was driving down a road late one night in the northeast of England. It was pitch black, and that kind of road that has high hedges on either side. The road was very bendy as well, and the full-beam headlights constantly picked out trees and other items that seemed to jump out at me. I must admit, I was getting pretty nervous driving alone there. As I went around one bend, the headlights shone back off what seemed to be a patch of mist. I thought at first this was the beginnings of a patchy mist, developing and slowed down even more to compensate. As I drove on, though, I met no more misty patches until about 1 mile further up the road, where passing through a small wooded area, another small patch of mist appeared in front of me. I pushed on the brakes a bit and slowed down to pass through it. As I entered this misty area, I realized that there seemed to be 2 people inside the mist, so I abruptly swerved and pushed harder on the brakes again. I pulled off to the side of the road out of concern for the safety of these people, and leaving the engine running and the lights on, I got out to check on them. There was no one there. The rest of my short trip back to the hotel was at breakneck speed. I was now terrified of every tree and shadow that jumped in front of the car. On arrival at the hotel, I mentioned to the barman who was serving a couple of customers what had happened. He asked where it had been, and with a strange look on his face, explained there had been an accident in the fog a couple of years back involving 2 hikers who were struck and killed by a car on the road in that very vicinity. I shook it off. He was trying to give me a wind-up. The next day, however, my entire reality was questioned, for as I passed the very place of the misty patch in broad daylight, the small roadside cross and candles were plainly visible. Submitted by Stan. A final goodbye. This incident took place in Austin, Texas on August 19th, 1995, between 11:30 p.m. and midnight. A friend of mine named Kevin had been going through some bad times. He'd been suffering from partial paralysis of an injury he'd sustained years ago in a driving accident. His business was failing, his bank account was dwindling, and since he had lost his lease with the apartment he lived in, he had to live with a friend until he could get back on his feet. As sometimes happens to all of us, Kevin lost hope and felt that there was no way out, and so committed suicide on August 17th. I was told about this the next day by a mutual friend of ours. A bunch of us got together later to remember him and grieve. 2 nights later, while at a payphone at the corner of South Lamar and Barton Skyway, a well-lit street corner, talking to a lady friend, I caught a glimpse of something moving out of the corner of my right eye. I looked to my right across the street and saw Kevin. He was walking without any sign of paralysis at all. He looked completely solid. As he walked, he looked at me, smiled, nodded, and then disappeared. Oddly enough, I was not frightened by the experience. I was sure surprised. I went out and told another mutual friend of ours of my encounter, and he told me that he'd heard that Kevin's sister-in-law had also seen him. According to her report, she was making some sandwiches in the kitchen of the house she shared with her husband, Drew, when she felt a chill, followed by the feeling that she was being watched. When she turned around, Kevin was standing in the doorway of the kitchen just a few feet away from her. He spoke to her saying, "I'm okay. Everything is all right. Where's Drew?" She screamed, and he disappeared. She and I are the only ones who saw him. 2 days later, Kevin was taken to Dallas and laid to rest there. As far as I know, his ghost has not been seen since. Submitted by Scott. Have you had a paranormal encounter? Do you have a story to tell? Why not tell it to me? Submit it at my website, www.myhauntedlife2.com. Good night.